Friends, pinch me. This is only the second time I've said this in my life. Today, I'm so excited and honored to have with me one of the greatest innovators on the guitar the world has ever seen. I put Stanley right up there in innovation on the guitar with Jimi and EVH all day long. In my humble opinion, he doesn't get the credit he truly deserves. With a plethora of bedroom Instagram guitarists out there the past decade, all trying to one-up each other in acrobatics, the word genius is used far too loosely today in guitar. But with Stanley, this term is absolutely truly accurate. He is indubitably the real deal. He has always been the real deal, guitar genius, ever since I started following him in the early 80s when he was busking in New York City, before the term even became fashionable. Simply go to YouTube and check out his live renditions of Eleanor Rigby and Stairway to Heaven, and you will know why. Kids, you don't know what you've missed. Back in the early 80s, Stanley established a two-handed tapping technique with multiple chord voicings using multiple fingers simultaneously that was far ahead of its time, expanding on the instrument's vocabularies and capabilities where EVH and others left off. In 1985, his debut album, Magic Touch, debuted on a revamped Blue Note Records and remained on the Billboard Jazz Chart for 51 consecutive weeks, a record that still currently stands. Today, after performing years of solo shows and with a variety of the music elite, he has created a must-see live tour, an intriguing project called Stanley Jordan Plays Jimi, where he has envisioned what Hendrix would sound like today if he were still living. Stanley performs Jimi's full catalog with his incredible trio with Kenwood Denard on drums and Wes Worth on bass. I can't think of a more worthy player and trio who is more equipped and qualified to honor the great Jimi Hendrix's vision. Please welcome the one and only Stanley Jordan.
Hello.
Stanley, wonderful to meet you. Great to see you again. It's an honor to have you here.
Thank you. So great to be with you here today.
Thank you. First, I'd like to start. I bet people do not know this. What does Yngwie Malmsteen and Stanley Jordan have in common?
We both know the harmonic minor scale.
That's a good second guess,
know.
I would say. You certainly do. Yngwie using it in neoclassical, but no. The real answer is, and this is really intriguing, you both first picked up the guitar on the day that Jimi Hendrix died, September 18th, 1970. I found that amazing. He said that in several interviews, and you said it.
Wow. Well, in my case, it's close. It's not exactly what it is when I got the news that he died, that's when I made up my mind for sure that I was going to play guitar. So it's definitely not any kind of like a coincidence with the date or something, but it's a real conscious decision that I made. And in fact, I mentioned that when I'm doing my Hendrix tribute show to explain to people what is the kind of sort of spiritual background behind wanting to do this project. Because my whole life as a guitar player, in a sense, is a kind of a footnote to Jimi when you look at how I started. Because, I wanted to basically continue his legacy. But the thing that I got from Jimi that was most important for me is that the guitar is a personal instrument and you can find your own sound and find your own voice. So even though in the early days, I definitely emulated him and, I wanted to, I was just friend of mine who I recently lost a few years back, but we were like buddies. We played in bands going all the way back to like junior high and elementary school even. And I was Jimi Hendrix and he was Bruce Lee. Okay. That's just all there was to it, Anyway, so the point is that when I started to experiment with the guitar and find my own voice, the direction I went in was unique. But Jimi was the one who kind of opened that door and said, "Hey, you can play guitar whatever way, makes sense for you."
Fascinating. I could see you during Halloween dressing up as Hendrix and your best buddy is Bruce Lee and duking it out. That must have been hilarious back in high school or something, you know? Hey, did you actually play guitar before Jimi Hendrix's death? Were you noodling with the guitar?
Well, almost, not exactly, but I actually wanted a guitar earlier, and I did get a guitar for Christmas some years earlier. But I never actually played that guitar because there was no one to help me get started on it. When I first got the guitar, so I must have been, because this is when we lived in Santa Clara, so I must have been like 7 or 8. And I remember I was trying to tune up the guitar, and I tuned it up too tightly, and 3 strings broke. And I didn't really know what to do, and my parents didn't know what to tell me. And so there was a show. I don't know. You said that you were in San Mateo. I don't know how long you've been in the Bay Area, but this goes back to the late '60s. And there was a big show. Dave McElhatton was a big show in the Bay Area, and he would come on and he would expound on the issues of the day. The big issue, of course, was the Vietnam War, and so a lot of news, politics, economics, and stuff. And so I called into the show. And my mom was actually listening upstairs to the show, and all of a sudden my voice came on, and I said, "I have a guitar, and I broke 3 strings, and I just wanted to know what I should do." And so here's this guy, brilliant guy, he's expounding on all the big issues of the day, but he didn't know to tell me, go to a music store. They will help you. If you do strings, they'll set it up, So he thought it was cute, and he laughed, and he said, "Well, just hang on to it. I'm sure you'll figure out what to do." So then my mom came down. "Stanley, was that you?" So anyway, if I had gotten better advice, that would have been the beginning of my guitar career. But I was playing piano. I loved piano, and I was composing in a kind of a late romantic style. And, I was fine with the piano. But then some years later, when, we took back to the time when Jimi passed away, I didn't have access to a piano anymore. That was after my parents split up, and we didn't have a piano in the house anymore. We kind of took a hit on the economic scale. Mm-hmm. And so I suppose I was socioeconomically downgraded from a piano player to a guitar player, because I was able to persuade my folks to get me a guitar. But I was a little older, and I was resolved at that point. I've got to do this.
Yeah. So did you start off with classical piano lessons when you were a kid? At the age of 5?
And we were lucky. We were lucky in Santa Clara, because there was a piano teacher who lived just a couple of doors away. Mm-hmm. And so I was in the standard, John Thompson piano method, and I loved it. And the thing is, though, I was already playing piano. My sister, who's a bit older, my older sister, Phyllis, she tells me that I was playing as early as 3 years old, which I don't remember.
Wow.
But we did have a piano in the house, and I love how I learned, because I would just get up and sit at the instrument and experiment. And I didn't have anyone telling me to do this or don't do that. And so I just loved how it was like this. The piano was just like this board of options, and you could just put your hands down and get sounds. And then if you don't like it, you change it. And, you can play a note that doesn't sound good in context, but you can't really play a note that's not a real note. You know what I mean? On the piano. And I just love just sort of reaching in and just melding into an ocean of sound. And I used to use and probably overuse the sustain pedal on the piano. Now we've got reverb,
Yeah.
But I mean, I love the piano, but when, after losing Jimi, and people were starting to, it was sort of a turning point because people were starting to lament at the loss of some of our big icons. We had lost Janis Joplin, and also we lost, RFK, and, there was a sea change. And I had this sense that something valuable was being lost, and that if I could start playing guitar, I could contribute to some kind of sustainment of that.
Wow. That's very deep and very profound. Think that at that age, you were thinking that far ahead.
Well, it's not, in a way, it's not so far-fetched, because it was an inspiring time to be alive, because so many of our heroes were really inspirational people, like I remember Martin Luther King. I remember Malcolm X. I remember like Sly Stone. So much of his music was really inspirational, and songs like Stand. And I mean, like, in my mind, part of the purpose of music was to make the world a better place, like beyond just the entertainment value or even the sort of aesthetic, critical success or whatever. I remember my first performance was when I was 10. So this was before I took up guitar, but we had a recital of all of the students of my piano teacher. This was in Palo Alto now, a couple of years later. Mm-hmm. And I was the only one who performed an original composition. And I remember after the performance, a lot of the adults came up to me with this dreamy look in their eyes, like, oh, and it was like, it wasn't just like, oh, that was very well done, like pat on the head, very good boy, Johnny. You know what I mean? It wasn't, it was beyond that. It was like, it wasn't, they didn't come up to just to tell me that I had done well. They came up to express that they had a profound experience. And I could see the look on their faces that, like, wow, I did that by playing piano. That's pretty cool. The fact that the realization that music can touch people on such a deep level. I mean, I knew how much I loved it, but then to perform and see other people experiencing that was a life-changing point for me.
Was that your first composition?
Not really. No, my first composition was when I was 5. It was Griffey Grasshooper's theme. So what happened was, so my father had shown me how to make cartoons in books, like in the margin, like you make each picture a little different, and then you flip the pages. And my mother, who was a big time scholar and just had books, she was I affectionately say book hoarder, but I mean, she just loved books, and the house was a library, shelves and shelves of books. We had all the classics. I made cartoons in some of the classic works of literature, and so I had free reign for any of her books. So I would do these epic, sometimes one cartoon would take up like 15 books, and I'd have different musical selections that I'd put on for each one, And my main cartoon character in my stories was Griffey Grasshooper. And I realized that he needed a theme. So that composition was his theme.
That's amazing. I take it that your parents really supported your creative.
They did, and I feel really blessed about that, especially like thinking back on where we were positioned kind of in the society, because we were an upwardly mobile Black family living in the suburbs in the area that is now called Silicon Valley. And a lot of people were moving there because they were part of the high-tech boom. So they had dreams of, success in their careers. And certainly we had lived on the East Coast. We moved there because my father got a job. He was actually the first personnel manager at Hewlett Packard. And he hired Roy Clay, who we just lost last year, but the Clays were family friends. Roy Clay designed the first computer that Hewlett Packard sold. So we were part of this. And also when we moved from the East Coast, there were other people who kind of moved around the same time. My dad knew people. I believe the Clays came from the East Coast too. So there was sort of a migration, So just kind of thinking back and looking at where I was placed, a lot of families who were in that position, the upwardly mobile Black families, put a lot of pressure on their children to have, conventional careers. Like, you got to be, a doctor or a lawyer or, some successful career, And, I applied to Princeton and I was accepted. It was my father who suggested that I apply to Princeton. And so I was definitely like vulnerable to being one of those kids that had that kind of pressure on me, what are you going to do at Princeton? Well, I'm going to major in music. And, I think there was maybe a little bit of a pause, but at most 200 milliseconds, maybe, that's it. Like my dad knew that I loved music and that's what I wanted to do. And our parents told us that we should do what makes us happy. Because if we're happy with what we're doing, we're probably going to do our best work. And so chances are we'll probably have the most success as well. Really blessed that we grew up with that mentality.
It's fantastic. Is it just you and your sister, or do you have other siblings?
So after my father remarried, he had another daughter. And so she's about 20 years younger than me. So I have the two sisters now.
Yeah. Are any of them musicians?
Not really. I mean, they've all played music, my sister before me, because she was taking piano lessons, and then I would kind of get up and imitate what she had just played, And so that's my older sister. My younger sister, occasionally we do like little gigs together and stuff, and she would sing. She was definitely influenced by some of the film music that she would listen to. So her voice was kind of reminiscent, let's say, of Liza Minnelli, maybe. But I'm the one who's really gone into music as a passion and as a career. Yeah. And I think that I might have been a little bit of an influence on some of the younger cousins, because we also have some cousins in the family who have gone into just the sort of general entertainment world. And the most well-known of the cousins is Hill Harper, the actor. And also my cousin, Diana Jordan, she is also an actor. And, it's sort of my credit or my fault, depending on how you look at it, that I opened up that door and made it acceptable.
Have any of your other cousins become virtuoso musicians?
I can't really think of anyone who's gone as far as I have gone. We have an actual Jordan family reunion coming up, which unfortunately I will not be able to attend. But there's a lot of people on the Jordan side I haven't met. But there's a plantation in Mississippi, and we know that we came from there. And the reunion is in Mississippi. And it's deep. It's really deep thinking about this, because I would try to ask my dad stuff. So like his dad, so my dad's the Jordan, and his dad, Jordan, his parents were slaves as children. So I have great grandparents who were slaves as children. So it's amazing to think, if you look at it that way, it's really not that long ago in terms of the sort of ancestral memory. And I tried to ask my dad questions, but there was a lot that he didn't know, because he said that he would try to ask his dad, and his dad would say stuff like, "Oh, old man Jordan, he was mean. So who is this old man Jordan, who was so mean, and what traumas am I carrying, from that?" And so here's this guy who clearly was abusive. And in those days, it was sanctioned. And yet, to me, he's family, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's weird. It's like America is such amalgam of contradictions. And it gives us an interesting story because a lot of what we're all about is reconciling all these contradictions. The fact that even when the Declaration of Independence was signed, there were plenty of people here who would have been happy to stay with Mad King George, and the people who signed the Declaration of Independence, they knew that if this revolution didn't come off as hoped, they were toast. And yet there were plenty of people even then who were hoping the revolution didn't come off as hoped. So the democratic forces, as well as the anti-democratic forces, it's still our story. What are we going to do? How are we going to deal with this? It's amazing.
It's truly remarkable that you have this lineage that you could delve into with these contradictions, and you could write a whole album on this, I think. And base a theme on this, because I would be privileged to know that I had an extensive family gathering in Mississippi or anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of that, I'm sure, has contributed to your musicality, just the open-mindedness, just the openness of being able to explore within your home and to go through all of these books. Like you said, like your mother was a scholar.
I remember Tristram Shandy and Tess of the D'Urbervilles, and
Amazing. This goes so far beyond guitar. Guitar is just manifestation of it.
Yeah, and my mother, who was studying for a PhD at Stanford, she was in love with the arts and letters, writing. And my father was the scientist and the business person. My father actually took a course in computer programming in 1959, which was the year I was born. And he said back then, people would ask what he's doing, and he'd say, "Oh, I'm learning to program the computer." Look, computers, what's that?
Yeah.
But we were in on the ground floor of that whole revolution. I mean, my dad led the team that computerized the Social Security system.
Wow.
So, and then the only reason he got laid off was because I guess they did such an efficient job. They closed down that whole department because the job was done, and that's when we moved to the Bay Area. And so the fact that I've got the kind of the scientist side and the artist side combined, I think is a big part of who I am still today.
I can see that. I mean, to come up with a new way of playing that takes the right side and the left side of your brain.
Well, that's a good point. Yeah, too, because it was very scientific in how I went about it. And I knew what I was trying to accomplish. And I tried a bunch of different things, and I tried this and I tried that. And I worked it out. I figured it out.
I really want to get back to that because I find that fascinating. So you're a tinkerer. You've always been a tinkerer.
Yeah. I don't want to call myself a tweaker because I think that has bad connotations. But
I like tinkerer better.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm always messing with things, Sometimes it didn't go so well. So,
Well, Eddie Van Halen was like that, but with equipment. He'd blow up equipment and then he'd put it back together. Oh, let me try this. Let me try to use this low capacitor.
Yeah, we've always done different things like that because I had a lot of friends who were tinkerers as well, and so and so like somewhere in my archives there's a cassette of me playing with my friend Neil. So Neil Janklow was a pianist who was a hero of mine growing up. He was a couple of years older, and we used to jam together, but we didn't have cars. He was old enough to drive, but he didn't have a car yet. So we would get together and we would jam over the phone. Because this was back in the days of analog phones. So we'd hook our phones up so that it was like the line signal, right? And so somewhere there's this recording of like a guitar and piano just jamming, just going at it, just playing and playing and playing. And then the guitar stops. And then I come on, I say, "Hey, Neil, man, I got to call you back. My dad needs to use the phone."
Oh, wow. I remember those days being on the phone for 6 hours with my friend. And all of a sudden you hear weird sounds. I said, "Is that a pterodactyl?" All of a sudden, I heard the scream, and we both said the same thing. This is uncanny. So I should say, are you grateful that your parents actually kind of pushed you toward an ambitious career? This reminds me of the Asian families as well. Like, oh, I want my kid to be a violinist for the.
Well, I mean, I don't know if they really pushed me. I mean, if anything, I kind of wish they had pushed me more than they did. But the thing of it is, it was implied. It's like, well, I kind of need to measure up, because both my parents were so accomplished in their fields that it was inspiring for me. But there wasn't like a lot of pressure. It's not like I came home and, they were waiting at the door. "Okay, let's see your grades." You know what I mean? But I knew that, how like your folks can look at you with just one look and you're like, "Ooh, sorry." I knew. And after my parents split up and my mother and sister and we moved to the East Coast, I lasted about a year, and then I went back and stayed with my dad, not because I chose my dad over my mom, but just that I wanted to live in California. And so, my dad and I were basically two bachelors. And I was the teenage bachelor, and I recognized that my dad was doing a lot of work. He had a very stable life, and he would wake up early and go to work and made it possible for me, to have the life that I had. And so I didn't want to mess with that. I didn't want to disturb him. I felt so blessed watching my dad work so diligently. And so I have to say that's how I learned how to play such soft, sweet music, because I didn't want to wake up my dad. Yeah. And it's like, well, if he does hear anything, maybe it'll help him get back to sleep,
Such a tender soul and considerate of your parents, I would say.
Yeah, at that age, I guess that is maybe kind of rare.
Yeah. Were you always a jazz fan?
I always loved jazz. I think I started out on the classical side, as I mentioned, playing piano, but it was rock and blues that got me excited about guitar. I had heard jazz before, and I wanted to play jazz, but I didn't have a way in. It was very complex, and I loved that. But they didn't have all the teaching materials that we have today, which is, I think, a mixed blessing, because I kind of learned old school. I learned on the bandstand. We had jam sessions, but there were a couple of books that were pretty new, like Jerry Coker's book, Improvising Jazz, excellent book. David Baker was just starting to publish his stuff. So there were materials out there, but it was just the beginning of that. And luckily we had some really good jam sessions. Flip Nunez, who I think lived in Hayward, he would come to Palo Alto and play like a Sunday night session at La Malette's at this restaurant. And it was great, man. It was like the real deal, and that's really kind of how, and also Elroy Jones, brilliant person, brilliant musician, lived in Palo Alto and Mountain View. And I studied with him, like informally, like not like, okay, here's your weekly lesson, but just he had gotten out of the rat race and moved down the peninsula to start a family. And so I was this kid who came along and was an aspiring musician. And so he taught me so that he could have another person to play music with. So I learned in person from real people. And I think that is the best way, by transmission, by direct transmission. In the spiritual world, in the Eastern spiritual traditions, they have this thing, called a guru, and the concept of the guru effect is that just from being in the presence of the guru, they automatically raise your vibration. They raise your consciousness. You begin to evolve spiritually toward your own enlightenment and your own fulfillment just by being in the presence of the guru.
Absolutely.
And I think that that's a beautiful way of saying, how I'm fond of one of Aristotle's statements that the essence of something is what it is at its highest. And I think that is the highest way of expressing what I'm trying to say here, that we learn and we grow by direct transmission.
Yes.
And so, by the way, one of the things I would like to do, I started to work on this, and we weren't able to make it happen, but I still haven't given up on the idea. I want to have like music camps in the wilderness. I started working with some folks in Virginia, and they bought an old mill that used to make grain in Virginia, and it was already repurposed into an art studio, and then they bought it, and we're going to be bringing music and all kinds of events there. 24 acres, 2 lakes, trees everywhere, and I want people to get together and turn off the cell phones, turn off all the devices, and really connect on a personal level.
That's fantastic. That's the trouble today with all of this technology. We are not delving into experiences enough. It used to be back in the day, like in the 70s and 80s and 60s, we would get together and enjoy our experiences for the sake of the experience.
Yeah.
And we lost a lot,
Mm-hmm.
with not having that because of technology. Great idea, by the way, of you going into the wilderness.
We are going to do this. And, a lot of historians, one notable example, Ken Wilber, has pointed out that you can define an age in history by what was scarce at that time. And so like people fought wars over oil or over, whatever was the scarce resource, and that defined a lot of the story. And we're in an age right now, people talk about meaning, like true meaningfulness is scarce these days. But to me, I think there's even a deeper way of thinking about that. And it's what you were just talking about. The experience, the subjectivity, the subjective experience is getting neglected. Everything has become so objectified. And it's part of the legacy of the hard sciences. But people have already moved on from that. And yet our social structures, our politics, our economics, they're still in this mechanistic, reductionistic 20th century hard science model when the people have already moved on. And what we're crying out for is to bring back the power of experience. And I think that AI, more than anything else, really raises that question, because people are like, well, is AI conscious or is it not? And there's all these philosophical questions that are really, really hard questions. And rather than sit and struggle with these questions, people are just full steam ahead with this stuff. And one of the big sort of underlying danger that I see is it's just an aggravation of this whole idea that objectivity means more than subjectivity. So like, to give you an example, let's say like, okay, so my band, my European band, we're talking about recording an album in Hungary, and we're still working out the details. Hopefully we'll get everything figured out. And I'm like, well, shit, like this is going to be in like a month now, and I want to have some new music. So let's talk about what new music we're going to play. And I'm going to be writing some stuff, and when can we rehearse and all this kind of stuff. And there's this whole process of creating music and then going into the studio and making the album. And, if I could just push a button, boom, and the album comes out, would I prefer that? Fuck no. It's like, pardon my language there, but I mean, that it's like I deliberately don't swear so that when I need it, it really
has
means
more
something.
impact.
You know what I mean? Like, no, fuck that. Like for me, the experience, it's all about the experience. It's like that moment when I was 10 and those people came up to me with that dreamy eyed look.
Yeah.
You know, that to me is so much of what music is about. Is taking people out of this mundane thing where we're all just feeding into the machine, and the machine is like, never mind the ghost in the machine. What if there isn't even a ghost in the machine? You know what I mean?
That's irreplaceable, really. That whole experiential
Yes,
realm.
yes. And a big part of why the arts are important, and this is part of the why, like I do a lot of seminars, I do a lot of teaching and stuff. And for most of the things I do, there's no barrier to entry. I mean, I don't audition you like, are you an expert or whatever? Like, sure, I love to work with people who are really advanced or really talented or whatever. Of course, I love that. But there's so many universal principles that we artists have that the world needs. And so I think a big part of my work as an educator is getting everyone to understand what it is to be an artist so that they can approach their life more from the point of view of an artist. Because one of the things that we get in the arts, we understand the value of subjectivity. And we're kind of one of the last islands of people who truly, totally get that. And so I think the world needs the contribution that we make right now.
Yeah, I interviewed a flamenco guitarist, and he brought his art to Panama and started doing these camps in Panama.
Mm-hmm.
And it was life-changing for him. So I see this as not only as a business, but just a growing extension of art for you to teach people how to experience music. You know, and then you could expand it all over the country, all over the world. That's really wonderful. I just want to check on the timeline again. So you were born on the East Coast, and then
I was born in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And we moved out when I was, I think, under a year old, around one or so. Then we moved to Baltimore. Then we moved to Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've got memories of being like 3 and 4 in Philadelphia. We lived in Mount Airy, and I'm basically on the cusp of Gen X and the Boomers. But according to the Strauss and Howe generations theory, I would have to call myself fundamentally a Boomer. I mean, I'm Gen X in the sense that I was a latchkey kid. There's a lot of Gen X stuff that I remember.
Yeah.
But the thing that I think qualifies me as a Boomer is that I remember the Kennedy assassination. That's like a cutoff.
Yeah.
Because I remember on TV, I remember the casket and the Mendelssohn Death March and all that.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah.
Well, I think the Boomer generation ended in 1964. So technically, I'm a Boomer as well. Mm-hmm. Born in 1963. Mm-hmm. And I don't remember the Kennedy assassination.
Well, according to Strauss and Howe, and I like the way they think of it because it's not just a matter of the years, although that is a lot of it. You know, it's an approximate thing, right? But the way they look at it is that generations are shaped by what they remember and experience. And there's like a culture, like the generation has a culture, and that they've traced these cycles of 4 different archetypes. Mm-hmm. And I had this insight one day that the 4 archetypes maybe correspond with the 4 quadrants in Ken Wilber's integral theory. And I was like, oh man, this is like so cool. And then I found somebody who had the same idea and fleshed it out really far. And so that's gone really far in my own thinking, because basically it helps to understand what the different themes are of the generations. This, I don't want to get too off the track, but this is something that I'm really fascinated by. And the fact that my music is going out into the real world, so I should know something about the world, you know. And the idea is, so like the Boomers are what they call a prophet generation, prophet like the prophets. And the prophet generation is very sort of internally focused and more subjectively focused. And basically, generally, they grew up at a time when there was relative stability and security. And so they were able to experiment. And so they forged the way. So like a lot of the spiritual generations, for example, my daughter lives in Lancaster. Lancaster was founded by that same generational archetype, those people who were very, very spiritual. Mm-hmm. Then following this more spiritual generation is the people who kind of rebel against that because they're all you people, you're so woo-woo, airy-fairy, I got to deal with the real world out here. And that's because a lot of the young people were neglected somewhat as children because their parents were off contemplating whatever. And so the kids didn't get so much hands-on attention. And so they have a little bit of resentment and they got to find their way. And so like Gen X, the sort of scrappy Gen X mentality comes from that. Mm-hmm. Those people, the hunters and the gold rush generation was that same, what they called it the cavalier generation. They were that same type of generation. So then they come along, and then there's an unraveling because things get more and more chaotic, and then there's a war. And it's the hero generation that comes along. Here we come to save the day, right? And the hero generation comes in and saves the war. And so like the greatest generation, what we call the World War II generation, was an example of that generation. And then they win the war, they create the peace. And then the next generation after them grows up in their shadow because they remember the war. And so they had a lot of fear because they were too young to fight the war. Mm-hmm. But they want to do the right thing. And so what we're calling the Gen Z, the Homeland generation, is that archetype. But things get weird. Like I made this thing, again, I don't want to go too far off into a tangent, but I made this, there's various versions of it. It's online somewhere. I have to find the link, but it's like an hour and a half that goes through the last 600 years. And it traces the pathways of these generational archetypes in the sort of like Anglo-American world, because that's the main world where they've developed this theory. And it goes through the different archetypes, and there's music that plays, and the music changes. There's 4 different musical scales according to the personality of the 4 archetypes. There's like a computerized voice describing the archetype, and you hear it's like the same stories come back again and again and again, and you really get a sense of this. And I was on the road one time with someone I work with, and we were just listening to that in the car. And she said at one point, "Hey, wait a minute, the music sounded weird right there." And I said, "Oh, it's funny you should mention that, because that was the one time, according to Strauss and Howe, that the normal pattern of generations didn't happen. Because during the Civil War, the normal progression was altered because the war was just sort of tragic for both sides. Although for my people, the Black Americans, the Civil War, the result of the Civil War was great.
Yeah.
But in the terms of the population in general, both sides kind of lost the war in a sense. Yeah. And so they said that they didn't produce a hero generation. Although it might be interesting to trace within the Black community, there may have been, that's where you might find the hero generation. That would be an interesting thought that just occurred to me. But anyway, so because we had been hearing these stories in this music and it becomes sort of intuitive, she noticed when the music didn't follow the normal progression. And that's one of the reasons I'm so tuned into this sonification thing, because we can understand things on such an intuitive level. Anyway, there's a video that goes with this. It traces the movement of the planets during all of this.
Stanley, I'm fascinated. Please give me a link to this. I want to delve into this.
Yeah, I'll send you a link.
And I'll also put it in the description.
Okay, yeah.
I'm overwhelmed and fascinated at the same time. Although
I tried to make a complete enough description of what the video is, and somebody was like, "Dude, what were you on when you did this?"
Yeah,
it's like the ramblings of a good mind gone bad.
So one of these like weird moments in history would be the 60s and 70s, wouldn't you say?
Well, no, it actually followed the pattern according to Strauss and Howe.
Yeah.
But I would say that the pattern is kind of getting disrupted now, because the millennial generation, which fits this archetype of the hero generation, and when they do the personality profiles, they totally fit the personality profiles of the hero generation, but they haven't been allowed to step in and take the reins. You know, we've got this, what they call the gerontocracy, where you have all these people refusing to let go of power when they should have been passing it on to the millennials. And so I think that things are kind of out of kilter a little bit right now, you know. And then maybe you've got people like me who arguably are not trying hard enough to hold on to their position.
Stanley, I want to get back into guitar a little more, all right? Because this is so fascinating, and I could see where your ideas come from. But getting back to this very novel technique at the time, where you're using all 10 fingers on your hands, did that develop very quickly for you? Like once you decided scientifically, I could maximize my playing.
Looking back, I mean, it was a long road to get there.
How long did it take you to develop this, to master this technique?
Mastery that's a tricky question. I mean, I put in my 10,000 hours, so Malcolm Gladwell would approve. Yeah. But I mean, mastery, and this brings up a whole idea, because I have to be careful what I say here, and it's something that I talk to a lot of my students about. When you're on the road to mastery, you kind of have to walk a line, because you have to be honest about the difference between where you're at and where you want to be. And if you have really big ideals, then chances are you suck compared to where you want to be. And that's definitely true in my case. But that's also because I have such high ideals, you know?
Yeah.
And so the point is, like, how do you recognize that disparity between the two? And that gives you the pathway for growth, but at the same time not fall into perfectionism, which can be debilitating. It can actually slow your progress down. And so it's like, I don't really want to hear myself say, oh, I'm not a master. You know what I'm saying? But I'll just say it's a lifelong process, and I'm definitely on that process.
Yeah.
I would say a lot of it was figuring out how to adjust the guitar to get the sound that I wanted. And that's a whole other thing. But then once I had that pretty much down, one thing that really helped was that my training on piano came in handy.
I was going to ask.
Because I already, you know, the coordination between the two hands and the roles of the hands, I basically adapted from piano. And so that really helped. I had also been doing fingerstyle, and I'm not great at it. I'm no Muriel Anderson. I'm no Chet Atkins, but you know, I love playing fingerstyle, and I had been doing a lot of that. So I had some right hand dexterity in the individual phalanges, and so I was able to put together bits and pieces. Also, I had already been extensively studying jazz, and that required me to learn chords and scales all the way up and down the neck. And so that position where the right hand is like high up on the neck, I already knew my way around that part of the neck. Yeah. So, you know, I put together bits and pieces of stuff that I already had. I also have an unusual tuning, fourths tuning.
That's right. Everything is tuned to fourths. I was going to
P4. Yeah.
And this was born from you developing this technique, because
before the technique, I started using that tuning.
It was easier.
It simplifies the fingerboard.
Yeah.
And so when you're playing chords and scales all up and down the neck, you don't have to memorize as many visual patterns in order to play the same musical patterns. Yeah. So it's efficient. If you're learning a lot of stuff on the guitar, it's in the long run, it's efficient. I've got, for example, on my website, I have a catalog of guitar chord voicings. And it's got about 570,000 pages of guitar chord diagrams.
Oh my God.
The total number of actual diagrams is about 25 million. And that's all in P4 tuning. If I had to build that same website for standard tuning, because the chords change depending on what strings you're on, So the formatting would have been a little bit of a nightmare, how to lay it all out. But then it would be somewhere between 25 to 75 million chord diagrams instead of a mere 25, you know?
Yeah.
So, I mean, if in the long run, to me, this tuning wins out if you're learning a whole bunch of
In fact, one of my listeners said he was inspired to go all fourths tuning.
Well, let me tell you, you know, it took me way more time to make up my mind to get serious about fourth tuning than to actually learn it. You know, because it was confusing because I would go back and forth and I'd forget what tuning I'm in. And so I would like reach for something a half step away, which is about as wrong as you can get musically.
Yeah.
And so I got tired of always making those mistakes and the kind of low self-esteem that goes along with that. Like, damn, I can't believe I forgot that again, you know.
But playing blues and rock, you were playing pentatonics like
and I would say that the standard tuning does have an advantage for blues. And I've adapted with fourth tuning. I can still play blues in fourth tuning. But yeah, for blues and a lot of the rock stuff, yeah, standard tuning is, I think, overall better. So it also depends on what you want. But if you're dealing with jazz where you need to have a big vocabulary and deploy that vocabulary in real time, you're sort of a real-time composer, theorist, and performer, then I highly recommend this tuning.
Yeah.
So I already had the tuning. So, and when you got left and right hand all over the neck, you know, anything to simplify it is definitely gonna help.
Now, considering the timeline, let's just say around the time of Jimi Hendrix's death, when you started getting serious with guitar, how long were you playing in standard tuning before you started delving into wanting to change your tuning to fourths?
All right, so I was 11 when I started playing guitar, and I was about 15 when I changed my tuning, and I was about 16 to 17 when I developed the touch technique.
Wow. Okay. So that would mean that you developed your touch technique around 1977.
Yeah. And I saw an ad in Guitar Player magazine for the Chapman stick. And I realized instantly, oh, that's the same tuning. I mean, the same technique that I'm doing on guitar. And at that time, I was hanging out at a music store in Mountain View. Well, Paul Edwards, who was demonstrating sticks for Stick Enterprises, he came and did a demo, and I met him and played, and he ended up introducing me to Emmett Chapman. And my career as a stick player is still non-existent. It's never really taken off, but I've always appreciated certain things about the stick, like the fact that it's got so many strings, it's got that deep bass register, and it's got this enormous clarity in those. It goes even lower than like a bass, but with so much clarity. So one of these days I still would like to play the stick, but the setup is so different from my guitars that I can't just pick one up and just instantly like start to wail on it. So I'd have to sit down with the instrument and like really
work it
in the woodshed to do it justice, you know?
Yeah.
But at that time, it was in the air. People were experimenting. Now, there are other artists who predate us. You know, Dave Bunker predates us. Jimmy Webster predates us. Mario Macaferri was doing stuff. Even my understanding is that Paganini was doing some tapping stuff on the violin, and Paganini played guitar, you know, so.
Well, you heard of Roy Speck or Smeck? Roy Speck. In fact, in the 1930s, he was using two-handed technique on a ukulele.
Another one. Wow.
Yeah. Look.
There's a
Roy Speck. I'll give you a link. I'm going to actually put a link in the YouTube video as well, but I'll send it to you. Also, in 1965, Dr. Vittorio Calabrese.
That's the guy from Italy, right?
Yeah.
I was on a TV show with his son on Italian TV.
Wow.
Yep, that guy. That was my dad.
No wonder. Amazing.
Yeah. So, you know, it's something that was definitely in the air. I didn't have any examples. I worked out on my own based on wanting to play the guitar like a piano.
So you weren't inspired by any one particular being.
I never saw anybody do it, but there's various things. Like I'd see Jimi Hendrix play with one hand for a while and be like, hey, whoa, what was that? Or like Roy Buchanan with the scoop harmonics reaching up. I remember one time Joe Pass did this solo guitar thing, and he's holding his last chord, and then this high note comes in like really high, and it's like, oh, he had to do that one with his right hand. There's no way that he could hold that chord and then play that note.
Right.
So yeah, but so there were a lot of little things kind of suggesting it, but I worked this out on my own. I'll put it that way.
Did the physicality come easier for you because of your piano training? Because you're using all 10 fingers with the piano.
Yes.
Was that like an easier transfer to the neck of the guitar?
Yeah, that really helped. And in one way, we can say that the guitar fingering is actually even easier than the keyboard fingering. Because on the keyboard, you've got your hands with opposite, chirality, right?
Yeah.
And then you lay them down. And when you're playing scales, like let's say you're playing scales in parallel octaves, the whole key to keyboard technique is when you cross over the thumb, right? And it's going to happen at different times depending on where you're at. So it's just completely randomly unrelated between the two hands. Whereas on guitar, you've got your hands coming from opposite directions. So that cancels out the chirality of left and right. Mm-hmm. See what I'm getting at? Gotcha. So you actually have the same fingering, whether you play something on your left hand or your right hand. So from the point of view of your brain, the hands are essentially equivalent. The fingering is essentially equivalent. And so I do these things called handoffs, where I hand off a line, I pass a line back and forth between the two hands, or parallel lines or stuff. It's even easier on guitar than it is on keyboard. So I do a bunch of like wild, like symmetrical stuff. It's so much fun. And that combined with the tuning opens up a whole world. And a lot of the math rock stuff that I'm hearing, it's like I can hear, there's moments when I can hear what they're going for, and they're kind of like opening up that door a little bit. And so I'm really excited about the sort of the further developments of some of the mathy stuff too.
You like these next generation guitarists like Tim Henson?
Yeah, and like, so Polyphia, Tim Henson, a lot of these people, there's a bunch of people coming from Japan. There's a lot of people in other countries experimenting with the guitars. Like right now, people are experimenting with the guitar in all kinds of different ways. And are you proud of the fact that you've influenced all these people? And I'm like, I don't know. I mean, does it count as an influence if they've never heard of you? I'm not sure.
It should be. I mean, even for osmosis, you've influenced so many of these next generation guitar players.
I think there's some of them have heard of me, and then there's the ones who have heard of me and don't want to admit it. There's like a whole continuum there. But I do think that this idea of the spirit of innovation is really alive and well on guitar. And I just love seeing that.
I love that also. I'm just a bit lamenting that ear training is not enough of an emphasis with all the YouTube learning today. Mm-hmm. When we didn't have those technologies, I used to copy records.
Oh man,
Al Di Meola records, and try to learn a line for hours. Mm-hmm. And
I used to have a turntable. We had an old turntable that had a 16 RPM speed.
Oh, so you used to copy records too.
And 16 is about half of 33 and the third. It's close enough. Yeah. So everything goes down an octave, but it's half as fast. So like stuff you're talking about. So like there was this one like amazing, I think it was a bass clarinet solo on a Chicago record. And I was like, man, that's amazing what this dude is playing. This is like mind blowing. So I slowed it down to 16 RPM. And basically it's like, oh, he's just going up and down blues scales. I mean, it's still cool. It's still a cool solo, but that definitely demystified it for me.
That was a Terry Kath solo, probably.
No, I'm talking about bass clarinet.
Bass clarinet, sorry.
Bass clarinet. But yeah, some of the really fast stuff like Jan Ackerman or people like Alvin Lee, like people who are like super fast, John McLaughlin, you could slow that stuff down, and it's definitely a lot less impressive at half speed, but it's still cool. Don't get me wrong. But anyway, so then you have the fact that nowadays they've got technologies where you can change the tempo without changing the pitch. So I love that, and I love the shortcuts. But again, there's an experience like when I did my very first record, which was an independent release called Touch Sensitive, and I had this room boarded up with mattresses and blankets and stuff to keep the sound out as best I could. And I had no editing capabilities. And so there's just one really long song dedicated to Martin Luther King called I Have a Dream. And so I played this version. It's like you had to get the song right from beginning to end. If you screwed up and then you stop, it's like, well, there's no point in continuing. I better start over. But if you do that, if you start over, then you've totally screwed your brain up. And then it's really hard to get back in from the start, you know?
Yeah.
But then if I finish the song, knowing that I'm not going to use this version, then I might, by the time I finish, I might be exhausted and demoralized. And, you know, it really requires you to reach deep, to really dig deep. Absolutely. That performance is in me. I know that it's in me. And I finally had that brilliant performance. And I'm holding that last chord. And while that chord is fading out of here, you know, like part of me wanted to just keep it on the record. You know, okay, so there's a dog that has nothing to do with the message of the music. Yeah, I better not. I better do it again. But you know what? The final version was even better. I had an even better version in me. Yeah. You know, and if it weren't for that dog, you know,
you wouldn't have reached the zenith.
I wouldn't have reached that version. Right.
Yeah.
So, but that's, again, it's the experience.
Right.
Of reaching down deep. I remember going outside and looking at the stars and looking up at the cosmos and saying, God, please, you got to help me out here. I need this album and I need it to be great. You know what I mean? It's like you really had to work for it.
But that also made you a better musician, knowing that you had to dig deep and do the whole thing in one take.
Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah.
You had to. It made you, it epitomized your performance to do that. Mm-hmm. And I think that's missing today because there are too many tools to give you shortcuts. But then,
yeah, I have mixed feelings about all that because, you know, I grew up in technology land and I use all kinds of technologies.
Yeah.
I'm probably one of the more technically knowledgeable guitar players you're going to meet.
Yeah.
In terms of science and all that. And yet I still see it as a means to an end. I'm old school in that respect, too. You know, and I love that. I love the experience of like waking up, and my last dream was the sketch of a new song. I'm like, whoa, I remember it, and then I wake up and I'm starting to develop it. I'm still kind of in that twilight zone, and so I'm letting the song develop inside my organic biocomputer, you know, not farming it out to some external computing device, you know.
I love that line, my external biocomputer.
My internal
biocomputer.
Yeah, like Keith Jarrett only played electric piano on a Miles Davis session because he got there and that's all they had. But that was not his thing back in those days. And he was an early person who said, you know what? I'm not going to go that way. Electricity flows through all of us. We don't need to relegate it to wires. And so it's like, I love that. And I love the fact that we still have people like Keith holding up that tradition of the acoustic music and the traditional approach. And if anything, that frees me up to do other stuff, knowing that the traditions are rock solid. But, you know, Keith is getting older. He's had some health issues. You know, what are we going to do? In the same way that, you know, I was inspired by Jimi and I wanted to continue that tradition. Well, I was also really inspired by Keith as well. You know, and one of the things that I'll say, and this is really important to the younger musicians coming up, is that your music is primarily a spiritual path. Like, if you only had me for like, if you ran into me in an elevator pitch and you're like, I'm an aspiring musician, what can you tell me? You know, and like, we're already almost at my floor. You know, it's like, what am I going to say? What I'm going to say is your music as a spiritual path dedicated to the highest that you recognize in the world, whatever that is. And that's your path to making the best possible music. Ask yourself why you play. Ask yourself why you play. The better the reason, the better the music. Anyway, this is my floor now. See ya. Good luck. And I mean, because seriously, and we have now at this point, and I love that Gene Houston points out that we are at this amazing point in history where we've got all of the traditions from the past, all the things that haven't been erased, but we have got all this stuff converging on us and available to us at this time. We're in an amazing time, and here we're frittering it away. Let's not do that. Let's build a sustainable future. It's like, why am I here, in this particular incarnation? Well, if I had to boil it down to one thing, I would say to help humanity to build a sustainable future. I mean, and I'm not even sure I'm doing that good of a job of it. Can I upgrade what I'm doing here? But the point being that we've got the tools and we can use those tools. And the tools are not just technology and science and all that, but there's inner tools or inner technologies. And I would say that a lot of our philosophies and contemplative practices from the East are one of the best sources of that. And one of the things, going back to Keith Jarrett, one of the areas where Keith really inspired me is the idea of merging your meditation practice with your music practice. And I've got this whole approach that I call integral optimization, which I think does a really good job of explaining what it is. I wish I had something as cool and sexy as Kenny Werner's effortless mastery. Oh, well, he nailed it. But it's very similar. It's very compatible with Kenny Werner's approach as well. And basically in this approach, it combines the internal and external, the subjective and the objective. All the different levels, from the physical to the mental and spiritual, emotional, all that stuff. It integrates all of that and trying to be in the sweet spot in every possible way. Well, that's my approach. But Keith was highly influential in that because, in a sense, look at it like this: a practicing musician, and when we practice, we don't practice like a doctor or, say, a lawyer. We have this idea that we're practicing first in order to perfect it, which is already kind of a weird idea. I'm not even sure if I like that idea, but that's how we think of it. You don't want your surgeon practicing on you. Oh, well, I messed that one up, but I learned a lot. You know what I mean? But when we're practicing, we're playing music that's going to help us to learn. And that's the central insight that I got.
Yeah.
And the whole point of it is, like, if you're doing, let's say, a templative spiritual, discipline from the East, you're going to be meditating. And let's say that it's a mantra meditation. Well, what is a mantra? It's a sound that you repeat over and over again, right? Well, we musicians already have that. We call it rehearsal, right? And so the whole point is just to upgrade your concept of what am I doing here?
Yeah.
And because by playing this thing over and over again, it reminds me, somebody said, I don't know if it's a true story, it's a legend, but it's probably true. They said that they were staying in a hotel somewhere and that somebody was playing this blues lick over and over and over again all night. The next day there's, front desk, like, hey, I don't want to be a complainer, but there is this guitar player somewhere in the hotel and they kept playing the same blues lick over and over again all night. And the front desk clerk said, oh yeah, that was Stevie Ray Vaughan,
That's okay.
Right. So that's right. And so the point is, it's like, that's what it takes. That kind of dedication where, like, going deeper and deeper, instead of just building on and adding more and adding more on, but going deeper and deeper into one thing and finding yourself, finding the source of creation inside one note. For all we know, this whole thing is one note. They call it the Big Bang. Somewhere there's a solo, like a Kenwood Denard solo, and he goes bang, and that's our universe. You know what I mean? And so the point is like, upgrade your concept of what you're doing, and then that's going to upgrade the music. And Keith Jarrett has been totally inspirational to me for that.
Speaking of upgrading your concept of music, this idea of rehearsal, I wanted to touch upon how you approach reworking classics like Eleanor Rigby.
Oh, sure. So how to approach reworking? Okay, wow. What
Do
a
you
great
work it
question,
out?
and what
Do
a
you
big
work it all out
subject.
and then just improvise around what you worked out? Like same thing with Stairway to Heaven. Do you
Okay,
work
so
out-
so basically, like, let's say on one extreme,
yeah.
there's the classic, like the going back to Keith Jarrett, his
Yeah.
solo piano improvisations where he just sit at the piano, totally open with no idea what he's going to do, and then he just lets the music flow through him. Okay, that's one extreme. The other extreme is like a composition that you write out note for note. It's got to be played exactly this way. I'm a sheet music originalist. It's like there's some people who say that, you don't have any rights that aren't explicitly enumerated in the Constitution. It's like that, you don't have the right to play anything that's not explicitly written in the sheet music, So that's the other extreme, right?
Mm.
And then there's everything in between. And for me, that whole continuum is a source of possibly good music. And so I like to explore that continuum. But the point is that I'm always somewhere on that continuum. And so there's a balance of like, how strict is this? So I can make an arrangement that's not an exact arrangement, but there's certain high points or certain principles or certain, okay, I want to make sure that I do this. I might go out and say, well, I want this solo to, like I did this whole set one time I played in Toronto years ago. And it was really cold, it's that cold rain where it's as cold as it can be and it's still rain, it was like, and it's a lot of it coming down. And a lot of people were like, I'm glad that the roof doesn't leak at this hall, at the music hall. So anyway, so I played the concert, but I went in with this idea that I'm going to do a slow build and I'm going to start it with these ballads and really gentle, beautiful melodic stuff, and gradually I'm going to build it and build it and build it, and then I'm just going to end the concert with just a total blowout. I'm going to blow the roof off the sucker, right? And so I did. So by the time I got to whatever it was, Eleanor Rigby or whatever, the audience was like a rousing applause. The audience went to their feet. It's like it made that climax so much more powerful because of all the gentle sort of foreplay, pardon me.
Right.
But, okay, so I did that, and then the critic who reviewed the show was so busted because he said, I don't know why everyone's so excited about Stanley Jordan. All he ever does is play ballads. He never plays anything up tempo, nothing, with any like juice to it. Dude, man, you left so early in order to file your story.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
like
the
when
point,
I hear Stairway to Heaven, the way I envisioned it is you worked everything out off of the melody lines.
uh-huh.
All right. And then with your fourths tuning, with that second guitar, you were improvising over what you worked out, but you developed it very, very deeply. Like you reworked it and reworked it and reworked it until that amazing performance that I'd seen on YouTube.
Oh, well, oh man, I liked that performance. I thought it was a good performance, but it was the end of a concert and I was exhausted and I was barely holding it together. I thought overall the show was good, but
oh man, you sound like Alan
to Heaven. I was like ready to collapse, man, because I had put everything in. So considering where I was at the time, I thought it came off pretty well. But,
Stanley, one last question. I was fascinated by your Jimi show.
oh, thanks.
Jim, I loved it. It was amazing. Stanley Jordan plays Jimi. And I love your interpretation of what Jimi would sound like today if he were still alive. Explain your thought process of how you envisioned Hendrix's sound and musical choices would have changed if he were alive performing today, the way that you presented it during that show that I'd seen you on May 31st.
Well, the main thing is that late in life, he was moving into jazz, and jazz influenced things and kind of fusion influenced things. And he also was doing a lot of kind of Middle Eastern scales with the augmented seconds and stuff, He was a fan of Dick Dale, the surf guitar guy. Mm-hmm. And Dick Dale turns out from Lebanon. And so a lot of that that kind of stuff came into surf music through Dick Dale. And Jimi loved that kind of stuff. So a lot of that sort of Middle Eastern, interesting scalers kind of stuff he was delving into, and being so brilliant as a musician, and always having that raw blues, that powerful blues thing where every note is like pregnant with spirit. But then expanding his vocabulary.
Yeah.
Is kind of a mind-blowing thing. And so I love doing that concert. I think I'm really on to something. Am I doing it justice? I don't know, but I love trying.
Well, you're doing it since 2019. It's 6 years now.
Yeah.
And then you also do your Stanley Jordan solo show. Can you explain the difference between your solo show and some of the other projects that you do?
Yeah. Well, the solo is just the instrumentation, the fact that I'm playing solo. So whatever kind of comes from that,
Yeah.
And so it means that I can go deeply into things. I don't have to coordinate with other people. When I'm playing guitar and piano, the guitar and piano seem to read each other's mind. Obviously, you could do more with two separate people, but that's not the point. The point is the fact that the two instruments are played from one set of hands and one mind. So it's melding them into one instrument with a big color palette is sort of the whole concept of that, Yeah. So anyway, well, I've enjoyed talking with you so much.
I really enjoyed listening to your fascinating stories, and you're such an intellect.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. I'm fascinated by the world.
I'm fascinated by these deep dives that you go into regarding the realm of science and creativity.
Well, and I think that it's all connected, and a big part of what our age is about is taking the modernity ever since Kant figured out that like justice and art and all these things are separate and they need to be dealt with separately. That was a big innovation, but it's also flown apart into over specialization, and people don't give a crap about the externalities of what they're doing because you get to just focus on one thing. That's not the world that we should be living in. Right. So a big part of what I'm trying to do is help to inspire people to unify in our thinking and bring the pieces back together. Right. So great talking with you.
Great to talk to you, and I'll post the tour dates for 2025 and 2026.
Awesome. Okay, thank you.
I would love to talk to you again because there's so much more I had to talk about.
Okay, yeah, we'll do this again.
Fantastic.
Okay.
Be well, Stanley.
Yeah, you too. Thanks.
Bye-bye now.